If you told me that this is where I'd be working 10 years ago, I'd say there's no chance of that happening. When I first got started in woodworking back in 2012, I started with a job site table saw in the outside back patio of my wife and I's one-bedroom apartment in Southern California. Just before our first daughter was born, we moved into my dad's condo, which had a two-car garage, and I began to take small commission jobs to supplement my modest teacher's salary. With the price of rent taking up 50% of my yearly salary, we were struggling, living paycheck to paycheck. As my passion for woodworking began to grow, I encountered woodworking on YouTube. The first video I found was by John Peters, and he was operating out of his backyard barn. I remember thinking, man, that must be so cool to have a shop in your own backyard. Clearly, that would never happen here in our backyard. Fast forward to 2017, we've moved to Indiana, where I was born, and bought our first house in 2018. With nearly half an acre and no HOA, my dream of a backyard shop was beginning to become a possibility. It was here that I had quit my job and started Pax Woodworking and began building custom cabinets and furniture full-time inside my undersized two-car garage with 7.5-foot ceilings. After about 3 years working in our garage, it was time to start planning to build my own shop. I considered everything from hiring pole barn builders to purchasing an oversized tough shed, but despite my lack of general construction experience, a big part of me knew that I wanted to build it myself. Eventually, I found that people had been building homes and garages using these strange buildings called Quonset huts. I was immediately attracted to these buildings and the endless possibilities for customization. I found a company called Steelmaster, which is based out of Canada, and began discussing my needs with them. We settled on the S model and decided to go with the building at 40 feet in length and 24 feet in width. We knew there would be a little bit of a risk attempting to build this in our neighborhood, but since we didn't have an HOA and 2 houses down from us is a house with an attached basketball gym, which takes up their entire backyard, we knew that what we wanted was possible. The catch-22, however, is that we didn't have plans to submit to the city until we purchased the steel, which was roughly $14,000. Calculating our risk, we put a deposit down for the steel arches and the base connectors in December of 2021, with the delivery set for March of 2022. This gave me time to begin the joyous process of permitting. So I've written down kind of a schedule of how I'm going to talk about the whole process. So the first step in this building was I had to purchase the steel. Then I had to receive the plans for the steel. And then once I received those plans, I could then modify the plans for customizing. And then once I have figured out my design, I could then begin pursuing permitting to the city. And then once I learned that there are some setback variances on my property, I decide to petition those variances. And then I realized I'm not going to win, and they decide to still say no to where I wanted the building to be. So I accept it, and then I receive the permits accepting where the building can go, and then I begin building. So let's start off with the steel. Okay, once I had purchased the steel and once I had received the plans, it was now time to modify my plans for customization. So once I had those plans given to me, I could now start drawing up my plans for how I wanted to customize the end walls. Now, mind you, I have never built anything other than furniture and cabinets. So I don't know what any of the rules are or code is as far as whether I'm using 2x4s or 2x6s, or hardly even know what a header is at this point. But I gave it my best shot and drew what I understood the best at the time, and ended up with these very rough sketches to send to my engineer. and he was able to make the corrections necessary and turn these into real life drawings. So I really just want to show you to see how rough this was and how little information I knew before turning this into the real deal. So here was my initial design, and the initial design was this is going to be actually the rear of the building, where I was going to have 3 windows, and it was just going to be flat panel, and I was just going to do smart side, kind of like a shiplap look paneling on the back. And then, actually, here's the front. Let me show you that first. Here's the front. So I was going to build 2 doors here, and then I was going to have a window there, and then 2 more small windows here. And this section is going to be inset back about 6 feet to allow for a door entering into here, which you have already noticed in the shop that we kind of have this little patio section here. And that was kind of a design feature that I really wanted, so that we can kind of make it a little bit more, just user-friendly in the backyard, so that we can host parties and have a space to sort of set food and drinks and that kind of stuff, as well as having an entrance there. Just kind of a nice little feature. So we added that, and then that's what the inside of that looks like from there. So that is what I drew up to represent that section, which doesn't account for the top here where the steel, where it meets up with the steel. But again, that was the best that I understood for the moment. And then here's going to be the top view of the foundation. So the foundation, 40 feet wide. Initially, we were going for 24 feet deep. I'll explain why later, but we ended up only going to 20 feet. But yes, with an inset section here, so the foundation going all the way across, and we have footers going all the way around here. And I'll say more about those footers later on. But these are just my rough sketches, and then once we got to the actual drawings, here is what we came up with. There were some final changes made, but this is what we ended up with. And he was able to put this all into language and talk me through what changes needed to be made. For example, instead of using 2x4s, we're using 2x6s for all of the material. And we are going to I actually ended up taking out this window and only doing 1 window there. So 2 doors and 1 window, and then 2 windows on the back. So that's what the front looks like. And then here's what the back looks like. Almost very similar to my drawing, but a few more details. And then here's the top view. And now here's where we can talk about the foundation. So the foundation, like I said, 40 feet long, initially 24 feet wide, but we had to go with 20 feet and due to the setback variances. So the foundation, according to Indiana, the footers had to go to the frost line, which in Indiana here is 36 inches deep. So the foundation footers are 12 inches wide by 36 inches deep. And I had to go that way all along the perimeter and in right here and in right there. The reason why we needed such wide footers like that is to support all of the weight of the steel and being pressed up against those ends, since they're holding a whole lot of weight in those footers. So from there, this is how we attach the studs to the steel. Now this is the part that I had no idea how I was going to do, and he was able to give me a solution. So the steel has these ridges, right? They go up, then they go down, up and down. Well, on the inside, the stud is going to go up as high as I can get it, basically to where it's touching the steel. But then there's going to be a cross brace right here. And then that will be nailed to the stud this way. And then what we do is we take some steel to wood fasteners and go on the outside of the steel at the flat part and screw into that cross brace. So you'll see that in my shop where you got all these cross braces going all the way across. It's not the tidiest looking solution, but it definitely worked, and that's all that I needed, was something that would work. And then here is the location representing where the wall, where the entryway door is meeting up along with a curve. So these studs had to have a slight bevel right there with the top brace to line up with the steel as well. Plans, it's now time to talk about pursuing permitting. So one of the things that I learned is that there are several permits that I needed to pursue, starting with a drainage permit, an an improvements location permit, and a structural permit. So let's start off with that. The very first thing I had to do was come up with a site plan. This is the very first. I'd never even I'd never even drawn up a site plan before, and so this is my first draft, and you can see how terrible it is. But here's the basic idea, and I'll show you my improvements as I go on. Here's my next one, is a little bit more detailed. I'm actually using graph paper and starting to have a little bit of a scale and a little bit more focus. And then here is the final one. Actually, yeah, I think it was this one. Okay, and after all of those rough drafts of my site plan and for the drainage site plan, this is what ended up being the final site plan for my drainage permits. And it didn't need to be fancy, but this is what they approved. So it just goes to show that like you don't need to be a professional in order to make something like this happen. That you just need to represent the things that they're asking and requiring of. So I needed to make some sort of a legend showing where the fences are, the silt fencing will go, the proposed structure, the drainage of the water, and the slopes. So you can see here's my house, and then here is the proposed structure, and all these arrows are indicating where water is flowing to. There's an easement that goes behind our backyard, and as well as an easement on each side in between neighbors' houses, so the water just flows into a center channel and just kind of flows in this direction. So they need to know that based on where I'm going to put the building. And this matters because I initially had wanted my building to be only 5 feet away from my rear fence. They came back to me and said that the building cannot be any closer than 20 feet to my fence, and that is due to the easement. So as soon as I put forward this proposal, the proposal for where the structure will go, I now have to go and apply for what's called the improvement location. They accept my drainage site plan, but in the improvement location, meaning the proposed location of where the building will go, that's where they come back to me. The city comes back to me and says, your building cannot be closer than 20 feet from the rear fence. This was a big bummer. This was something I did not want because it's a big structure. We do have a good sized yard, but we don't want the structure to take over the whole yard. We want it to be as close to the rear fence so that we have as much play space as possible. So I decided to petition and see if I could just fight it and see if they would figure out a way to let me move the building farther back, even if it's 5 feet or 10 feet, something. 20 feet seemed a little bit extreme, and they still said no, even after, and that set me back a few months in that pursuit. I had to hold a whole public hearing and all that. It wasn't very fun, and it was annoying because I had to spend a little bit of extra money to do that. I had to mail letters to all my neighbors, surrounding neighbors that lived within a certain amount of feet of my house, and they still said no. So that is the reason why our building went from 24 feet deep to 20 feet deep, because I figured, well, if I can't get the building any closer, well, I guess I can drop 4 feet of the overall building here. So I ended up having about 4 feet extra of steel. Wasn't the best situation, but it wasn't the end of the world, and it was a compromise. So ended up moving forward and accepting the setback variances, so that was the petition, accepting the setback variances, and now I could finally receive my permits. And so I received my improvement location permit, as well as my structural permit, and now I'm ready to begin building. All right, time for another shop update, shop build update, that is. So the guys have been working hard getting all the footers dug out and the forms put in, and they're planning on pouring some concrete tomorrow, but there it is. So you can kind of get a sense of how the layout's going to work. Again, this is going to be a 20-foot deep
40-foot long section, and part of this section here is going to be a open patio, an outdoor patio, and the steel arches of the Quonset hut are going to go from all the way around like that. So part of the steel is going to be shading over an open patio, where we'll have traditional walls going up on the front here and up here and here, and then that whole back section will also continue there. So you'll see as we go along. But yeah, these footers are deep. We have to go down to the frost line, which for Indiana is at least 30 inches deep. So pretty, we're not messing around. Really important that we get these super deep, because the bolts that will be fastening the steel to the concrete are 10 inches long itself. So, and there's a total of like 42 bolts, I think, on each side. Okay, good morning. We're now at day 3 or 4 of progress on the foundation. The guys have kind of been in and out of when they are able to make it, jumping between jobs and all that. But yesterday and last night, really, they worked super late, I think till like 10:30 maybe, pouring these footings. And so, as you can see, these are the footers here, and this part is going down at least 30 inches into the ground to the frost line, which is important, especially for a building like this. You got the footers going here, and this is just going to be a basic 4-inch slab right there for the patio. And then you got the footers going all the way around. This is going to be where the double doors are going to be for the entrance to the shop. And we're coming along. We're hoping either today or the next couple days to finish out the foundation and get a nice smooth surface. And I can't wait to see it. I'll have an update later. Okay, so today is officially somewhat kind of shop build start date, I guess. Anyways, so really what I first need to do is get these base plates, connector plates, mounted to the footers, because these are going to be what the steel arches are going to be mounted to. But I'm still waiting on my bolts for this, so I'm going to just move on to the next step, which is starting to assemble the arches. So this is the very first arch. See how massive it is, spanning 40 feet long, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 panels per arch. Can't remember off the top of my head, but I know what I'm doing. Yeah, they are heavy. It's going to take me about 3 to 4 guys to lift all of these into place, and so that's going to be the plan. Okay, so for those of you interested a little bit more into the details of how this all kind of fits together, so I was mistaken. It's not 7 panels, it's 8 panels per arch. Each panel has a different function. So this panel here at the very end is called the wall. It is a straight panel. The next is called an eave, and that is the most curved of all the panels. And the next is going to be a set of 3 roof panels, 1, 2, and 3. And then there's also one short, which is just called a short, but it is also a roof panel. And the purpose of that is so that when I interlock each arch together, I will be basically overlapping one of the joints with something a little bit more sturdy. So it's not that way. All of the joints are not just joining to another joint, if that makes sense. And so as I put these together, I am purposely leaving the ends undone, because those will not be joined together until the whole arch is raised and joined in to another arch, if that makes sense. So once this is all put together, it stands at about 16 feet high in the center. So we're moving right along, just me by myself right now. It's tedious, it takes time, thousands of nuts and bolts. I think it's 16 bolts per joint, and there's 8 joints per arch, so you do the math. Yeah, but it's gonna be one sturdy SOB. I've got 6 out of 10 arches all put together. I only stopped putting them together because, well, it ran out of space. Guess I could keep on going over there or whatever, but Before I can even put those up, I've got to get these base plates installed here. These are the connector plates, and basically this section will get bolted into here, and you can kind of see the hole shape there. So I've started drilling out my holes. These are the bolts that are going into here. These are Hilti 10-inch long, 5/8 inch thick wedge anchors. These things are beasts, and they require a beast of a drill in order to even get these holes drilled out. So I've got one base connected already. This is the drill that I'm using right now. Didn't feel like spending $400 on a drill, so I wanted the Harbor Freight style, and this is doing just fine, and it's doing exactly what I needed to do with this massive bit. So it is very tiring to drill all that, and then you have to hammer in those once you get your hole drilled, you got to hammer in the bolts and then seal it shut with the nut and washer. So I still have this plate left to go and that whole other side. So that took me an hour probably to drill those out and hammer those in. So tomorrow that's what I'm gonna do, because I've got to get all that done before we raise those arches on Saturday. Oh, and this is a scaffold that I'm waiting till I have help to push this thing up, because we're going to need that in order to get bolts all the way to the top of those arches. So built that today, got that done, and boy, a lot of work, but it's coming along. Time to go do that inside. Alright, man, what a day. Seriously, huge thank you to Grant from the Village Woodworker, and Corey, Timber Truss, and Theo from Perpetual Hobbyist, and our friend Sam. Man, we all exceeded my expectations. I had 6 arches prepared. We were able to get all 6 up, plus adding a 7th. We only have 3 more to go, and it is really coming along nicely. It was very dicey adding those first 2 arches up. It was really sketchy. We started off trying to lift up the entire arch all the way, and you know, the bolts have to be loose. They have to be, otherwise things aren't going to fit together, and you have to be able to move them. So that makes it really wobbly as you're trying to get these things put up. And so, but once we got in the first one and then the second one, it got a lot easier. Okay, so all the arches are up. I was fortunate enough to have today back the same crew that was here with me last week, and we just did a half day today, and then I spoiled them all with some good barbecue for dinner. So awesome day, and I'm super pumped. We still have a bunch more bolts to go, really in this kind of center area that the scaffold is too high to reach, and so I have to kind of play with the scaffolding a little bit so that we can reach to get bolts on under really kind of these corners there. So I'm going to come up with some interesting solutions to get up top here safely, which may involve packing out or bringing out the climbing rope and setting up some anchors on each side of the ground, and that way I can kind of rappel myself up and down this thing, so that'll be fun. And then after that, we're ready for framing and getting ready for that. So hopefully I'll have more details in the coming weeks, so check back. But man, just behold this thing. It is huge. It is awesome, and I am so excited and beyond grateful and thankful for the friends that came out to help me today. Okay, here's the current status for framing in the shop. got a good amount done today. I started last weekend with just getting a couple of those in. Really only spent about 2 hours or so and was able to almost get the window finished. I still have to get a couple cripple studs from the top of the header up there, so I gotta get 2 more. And then I got a whole bunch here, and I've officially passed the center mark for here. Each stud is cut at a different length. I measure for each one, and then you can see how a brace gets put across at the top of each stud, and then I've got screws coming in from the top of the steel into those studs. So that's how it's being mounted in place. And there's also a bevel cut at each one of those braces. You can see that has to be cut for every single one. So it's very tedious and time consuming, but we're making it happen. I find it really helpful to use some clamps to help me hold things in place while I get everything attached up there for safety. Got the ladder mounted here with a spike going into the ground and the 2x holding it in place so that the ladder doesn't slip out. And even though it's already at an angle, it still feels very easy for the ladder to pull that way. So I've got it tied at the top through some of the accessible bolt holes at the top of the steel. So that way there's no way I can fall back. So that makes me feel a lot more easy getting up there. But yeah, once I get the brace up there, I have to drill from the top and then add two metal to wood fasteners to get the stud secured. And then once that's all done, once I've got all the vertical studs, I have to go in and get all my horizontal blocks every 4 feet, and that'll be for adding all the sheet OSB on the sides. So we're getting there. Progress is happening. And so here we go. Definitely starting to take shape. Got all of our studs put in, and that took forever. There's so many studs. I can't remember how many, but I think it's probably like 85 to 96 2x6x16s that I ordered. Everyone had to be cut individually, and you can obviously see that I still have some OSB to put up in that corner. And I've got the upper or the bottom half down here. And still got to get up there and there. Hoping to get more action on that tomorrow afternoon and Friday. Hopefully by this weekend, all the OSB is up. And electric is supposed to go in next week. So I'm super pumped about that.
Building the shop has been one of the most meaningful accomplishments for me. I can't tell you how many times during the process that I said to myself, "You are crazy. Why are you doing this?" But something in me believed that I could do it, even if I didn't know how it was going to happen. And that's the encouragement I have for people out there. It's vulnerable to become inspired, because with that inspiration comes the fear of failure. But I promise you that anyone who has ever chased after what they felt was crazy never regretted it, even if it does turn out to be a so called failure. Dare to dream and make it happen.